Hi everyone, welcome to the Green Room. I am here with my co-host Nick. My name is James, and today is episode 8.
Oh, 8, James. That's a significant number. 8
Is it
for
a
infinity.
significant number?
It is. It's a symbol for infinity.
Right.
Tell
me more.
In biblical and mythological teachings. So hopefully people will be playing back this video time and time again for years and decades to come. So hopefully, we can please the general public and answer some of their questions.
Agreed. Right, so what are we talking about today?
It's all about plastics today.
Plastic.
The good, the bad and the ugly.
Okay, fine. That makes sense. So, plastic, what is it?
Well, what's plastic? I mean, it's a byproduct of oil. It is used in many uses, primarily packaging. So we use our drinks bottles. We package food. We package all sorts of
groceries
with it
from the supermarket.
Plastic bags. So it's multiply used in our everyday lives.
Is multiply a word?
Thoroughly used.
Good. Okay.
Always used.
Yeah. So it's used all over. Pop quiz, when was plastic first invented?
Well, so with my fuzzy knowledge of history, I would have thought oil, 18 something, so 19th century, I'd say.
Yeah. Later. So I have a date, and this may or may not be confirmed, and we will fact check this, of 1872. And that plausible. Is when PVC was first made. And I think there were other plastics kind of made at the same time. But it really became commercially viable in the 1940s and 1950s. And it was and still is a very useful product because it's relatively cheap and it can be moulded into any shape relatively cheaply.
I was going to say, I guess, so after the war, as we sort of recovered from the war, and this is again me sort of thinking out there, we went into kind of a lot more mass production of things.
Exactly.
Food wasn't as scarce during the rationing, so we would have had more products on the shelves. And one way, I suppose, of having stuff up there that lasts a long time, you package it into plastic containers and stuff, and then it just stays there for longer. You can produce more things, right? Yeah,
and so we've got quite a scary fact here, and this is when you imagine a glass bottle or a piece of metal, for example, they can be recycled as many times as you want. Yeah, plastic between 1950 and 2015, only 9% of plastics manufactured were recycled.
So you just wonder where all of it's gone to. It's probably landfill sites or somewhere in the oceans.
Exactly. And so this now moves on from plastic fantastic to plastic not so good. So basically, there has been loads of interest. I think more recently, really, and I think it's because its impacts are becoming more and more far-reaching, and they're becoming more and more visible.
Yeah, and I think, because we've got more technology to monitor it, but also I think because now you've got such vast amounts of plastic out there, in terms of the oceans and stuff, we've just deposited it, and it's just more bloody obvious, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, it's now forming in these giant areas in the oceans.
I mean, I've seen it actually crossing over the channel and stuff. I've seen it literally. I'm on the ferry, and I can see stuff floating in the sea.
Yeah, not great.
No.
But apart from just the sort of the visual impacts, ruining your aesthetically pleasing cruise, what are the main issues with plastic being in the water?
Well, the thing is, it can't be fully broken down for a long time, but my understanding is plastics turn into microplastics. So they break down to some extent, but when it's a microplastic, it gets eaten by fish. It ends up in their food systems. It's then eaten by other mammals and so forth, and then all the toxicity of those microplastics can end up in that food chain, and eventually it can end up on our plates, and that's not good.
So that's not good, obviously, because fish is a vast staple of food for loads of people. But I think the other thing is it's also it can kill these other animals.
Yes.
Right. So when it is entering the food chain, And there was a bit of research done in Brussels recently, and it said that if, as a European, you're eating...
Place of birth.
It was my place of birth. Very good, very good. If you eat fish as a Brit, or a European actually, I should say, you are at risk of consuming 11,000 little bits of microplastic that you're talking about per year. So that's lots, but that's also, the fish are struggling.
Yeah.
We've had, and turtles and that sort of thing. There was turtles are being found to die essentially, and they're opening them up and looking at the guts.
Yeah.
And they are literally full of plastic.
And also because you get fishing nets as well. I know it's not plastic, but you get all
some
sorts.
Are.
Yeah, some are plastic. But you get just plastic bags, and byproducts of those plastic bags get tied up.
You've seen those pictures of
strangles the seals and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Basically, it's not great, right? And they reckon by 2050, the amount of plastic in the oceans will outweigh the number of fish.
And that's if we keep on going
at our current
rates.
Yeah. So that is a sort of horrifying statistic. So we're going to talk about, first of all, I guess, types of plastic. So what is the plastic we were talking about briefly before, which is this single-use plastic? So to describe to everyone what that is.
So single-use, in my understanding, is so whether it's used for packaging or for consuming of food or beverages, you eventually dispose it, and then it just it's either recycled or it's thrown away or it's dumped in some.
But it's the whole point. Single use. You are going to use it one time.
Exactly.
So if you ever go take my dog to the vet, and they have the little syringes, and they're plastic syringes, right? So once that syringe has been used, it gets chucked. Yeah, and I assume the same in hospitals and all that sort of thing. So these plastics, despite being incredibly useful, they're being used once. And one of the big ones there, big single-use plastic, is cutlery. Yeah, so I think it became big in the States, actually, in the 50s. Well, a bit later. It saves cleaning up. It saves washing up. Because instead of using expensive metal and having to wash that up, they just use plastic. And as soon as they're done with the meal, they chuck it away.
Yeah.
And then they'd get another knife and fork for the next one. And that is a complete waste, right?
Yeah.
And the reason, obviously, is because we've sort of discussed, despite some of these being recyclable, they aren't being recycled, and they're kind of going wrong. Another question. So, the average Londoner, how many bottles of water do they consume in the average week? Not the average week, in a week.
I did my research actually on this one.
Go on then.
So I'd say 3 to 4 bottles a week.
3 to 4 bottles a week.
Yes.
And so of that, now more and more is being recycled. But that leads on to the next thing.
But that's a lot. So if you add up all the population, that is a staggering number.
It is, yeah, huge number.
It's in the billions of bottles and.
Yeah. It's massive.
In the UK.
It is massive. And it's really good because obviously most of those bottles, if not all of them, could be recycled. The problem is they aren't necessarily recycled.
So there's problems in the recycling process because I speak to, so I in my council, I mean, they've had the recycling scheme for ages, but there seems to be kind of changing attack. So they went from the containers to kind of all-purpose recycling bins. But then, I went to another borough, and then it only just started a recycling scheme. I used to live in Wandsworth, and they have sounds a bit weird, but they have the most amazing recycling facilities, the sort of waste management plant. And I've now moved to Ealing, and it is less good, I'd say. But let's name and shame the two places that have no recycling at all. Rotherham and Tunbridge. Yeah, no recycling. So they don't even have that as part of their collection. Which, as you say, it's very, very confusing because it changes from borough to borough. So I'm just going to ask Harry, and Harry, do some, and this could be potentially worse, I think, do some have a recycling scheme and then that stuff, it still ends up in landfill sites?
100%. That happens a lot, actually.
So our Tunbridge, and what's the other borough did you say?
Is it Rotherham and Tunbridge?
It's Rotherham and Tunbridge and Malling. Tunbridge and Malling is one county.
Okay, fine.
So are they just being upfront and say, well, look,
Yeah, well, I guess that's
Is it worse being the other way, where you've got a recycling scheme, but actually it still ends up in the landfill?
So how do you recycle? As in, what's the process? So I've got plastic bottle, have a drink, chuck it in a recycling bin. What then happens?
Presumably it gets collected and then sorted. So it will get weighed, sorted on a different category of plastic. It will get repackaged.
And so there's loads of different types of plastic,
and
some they'd recycle, some they wouldn't. Now, a lot of the issues, I think, is that we can, as you say, you can melt some of these plastics down and reform them into different things. There are some plastics that you can't melt down, so you get like thermoset plastics, which don't melt as soon as so you heat them initially and they make the shape you want.
Yeah.
But if you heat them again, they just burn. They don't melt again, so they can't be redone. I mean, you can recycle in different ways, but that's not quite right. But I think a lot of the plastics previously that we've had, they will go and get exported to different countries that will then, in theory, take the plastic and recycle it.
And I heard that's about to stop. Is it?
So there's lots of countries where they're currently doing it, but they are now stopping. So China, Malaysia, Vietnam have banned waste imports. So what they were doing previously, and I think the key here is recycling. It's not an altruistic thing. You're not doing it to save the planet, or a lot of people aren't. It is very much market-led, right? So if there is money there to take waste, they will take the waste. And so as soon as money drops and there is no demand, it's not going to happen, right? So I think we need to take, as a country, as a world, essentially, we need to take a completely different view on plastics. And there's obviously loads of people leading initiatives and things, but we need to kind of follow their lead.
And it's going to be in. So we've seen it already. Yeah. So we've seen it with the plastic bags, for instance, or the levies that have been put on.
Yeah. So it's a little 5p tax.
So that's been very successful, and that's going up to 10p. I believe in England.
It reduced it down by 80% or something, didn't it? 85% of plastic bag use, and that shows. I think it shows for most things there is a alternative. If I say you're not allowed to do something, you will find another way to do it potentially, and that is the same. If you can use
plastic straws as well.
Yeah, and that's annoyed a lot of people, and I think the reason is because paper straws they sort of go all mushy.
They melt in your mouth.
Yeah, but is that fair?
You're saying that because you're a Londoner. Londoners use.
I don't use straws very much.
Yeah.
I take a glass for a cup and I drink out of them. So
they use the same number of plastic straws as Italy, more than Italy.
Londoners
alone.
But what's the population of the two places?
I'd have to check.
Because I'm imagining they're not million. If you said 12 million people live in London.
Well, it's 9. No.
What?
9 million in London, surely.
Well, it depends where you measure London from, I guess. But that's bad, right? So London leading the way.
60 million in Italy.
60? Okay, that's bigger than I thought.
Yeah, I think we definitely more initiatives like you might have seen biodegradable packaging as well. That's coming out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be up to the producers as well. But we need to put the regulations in place ultimately to basically move away from plastic packaging to kind of a bit more sustainable resources. So if you can have packaging that breaks down in a very short period of time, I think, that's one key fundamental way. Because the thing is, we don't want to necessarily stop the way we are consuming things and living. We don't want to go back to the dark ages because suddenly we can't use packaging and be able to kind of mass produce. We need to kind of still have the same quality of life, but do it in a much more sustainable way, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think so. I'm just going to do a really, really quick recap. And actually, what we didn't mention at the beginning of this is we had some feedback on our podcast, and we said we would structure them better.
Yes.
And we've sort of ignored that a little bit. So what we're going forward, episode 9, which I assume has a magical property as well, the number 9. We will produce a much more.
No, other fact that it's a lucky number, but
yeah. Your lucky number.
No, other fact that it is a lucky number.
Okay. Excellent. Hold that thought. we're gonna produce more of a sort of an outline of what we're going to talk about. So basically, plastic is actually very, very useful. Obviously, as we discussed, there are issues with it. Mainly that not much of it is recycled, and some of it is not recyclable. And we use it very much as a throwaway product essentially, which isn't great, especially the single-use plastics. There are loads of problems with recycling it, namely that it often isn't recycled, it's sent abroad, and then it ends up in rivers, and then these plastics break down, as you were saying, to microplastics, and they go into the food chains and all sorts of things. They cause issues with animals, and they cause issues further up the food chain with ourselves and everything. The main issue, I guess, is that recycling is a for-profit, it's a market-led process, and so if there's no money in it, people won't do it. So we need to kind of change that view.
In 2018, the price for contaminated plastics, which we were shipping to China and whatnot, actually dropped below zero. So it stopped being something profitable, and now people are expected to be paid to take it, as opposed to the other way around. Which is
paid to take it?
Yeah, which is going to see a big fall in recycling.
Okay.
Good.
Fine. That is not great. So there are lots of problems with it, and lots of problems with councils and that sort of thing, in that it's not a one size fits all. It's not like a standard process for each council, and so if I move house or whatever, that council may deal with recycling of plastics in a different way. So that's where we are today, right now. So what we're going to do now is, so there are some government policies that are designed to tackle plastic waste, right? There's some probably 10 ways that we're going to say that, quick wins. And then you're going to talk about a couple of the kind of bigger picture things that these folk, and when I'm talking about altruistic people, they are taking a big step to do stuff that is going to make, they're going to be game changers.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully. Right. So some of the government policies. Okay. So you talked about one, which is the plastic bags.
Yes.
Yeah. So they've put this levy on plastic bags,
and it's going. I think it's going up to 10p in England in April this year, but we might need to just double check that.
Yeah, but then I think, and this is one I was speaking to my sister about weirdly, but it's so it's very difficult to know, and if I take a plastic container with, I don't know, whatever, carrots in, right, and it has the sort of the cellophane stuff on the outside. Sometimes some of that is recyclable, and sometimes it's not. So there's very, very inconsistent labelling on plastics to know whether it's recycling. So they're really, really trying to double down on getting sufficient labelling so you or I will know straight away if it can be recycled or not. And therefore that then tallies with the fact that the councils have to have a consistent approach to it. So if it says it can be recycled on the punnet strawberries or whatever it is, it needs to be, I need to be able to give that to my council.
Because there isn't really a minimum percentage of recycled plastic within the regulations.
But they're looking at it. They're looking at 30%.
Because that would automatically work for me. Because suddenly, what Harry was saying, that point about the market price, suddenly the end user would effectively pay for it.
Yeah, but I guess there you might encounter the issue that, so if we did that in the UK, for example, so you say 30% of all plastics in the UK need to be,
plastic packaging,
Yeah, 30% of plastic packaging has to be recycled. Well, then it might mean that in a country where that doesn't exist, I would go and buy my plastic packaging from them because it's cheaper.
But you can ban plastic imports as well.
Yeah, you could do that. But it's something that would, as you say, in principle it would really help. But by doing that, it can't drive the prices up so much that it becomes unattractive. I think when I said earlier that glass can be recycled, paper can be recycled. If you go and buy carrots or whatever, I'm using carrots a lot here, but if you go and buy some carrots from a supermarket, that could come in a paper bag. Or you don't need it to come in a little plastic bag.
Correct.
And so there are things like that you could.
So I've got. You've probably got a green bin as well. Yeah.
I have got a green bin.
Do they? And do you have a little container in your kitchen
Yes.
And do you have a biodegradable bag that sits?
Yes.
Well, surely that's again a bit of the answer there. What I mentioned earlier. So you put it into kind of
it is
packaging like that.
It is, but the government need to put this tax in, right?
Yes.
Because if they don't do that, then it
What's
seems
the point,
daft. Yeah. But also they could put a ban on plastics where you could use an alternative. Yeah, so I know that milk, and it's changed because the sort of milk delivery process is different. Because the milkman used to deliver the milk bottles in glass bottles, and now people tend to go to a supermarket and buy in a plastic bottle. Mm-hmm. But glass is actually really good because it can be recycled.
Yes.
Yeah, so potentially we should move back to where we were, which would be slightly ironic, or not ironic, but we're moving back to get actually.
It's quite funny because I've actually got a multi-use plastic cup that I use now because the supermarket that I go to get the coffee doesn't charge me the levy of using the cup. So, but it's a plastic cup, but it's a multiple use plastic cup. So there are,
okay, so that leads us on there, right? 10 ways to use, and I'm thinking we can get 10 pretty easily here. I'm looking at Harry, hopefully. 10 ways that you can use less plastic.
Well, that was one.
That's one.
So to use either, I'd say the example of a multiple-use plastic cup, but it can be flask or
So I go to a coffee shop in the morning when I walk the dog, and there, if I take in my plastic cup, I get a coffee for 50p.
So that's good.
That's really good,
in
right?
addition, not only what you're saying is, so not only you're not paying the levy on the single-use product,
mm-hmm.
they're also giving you a much better price.
Exactly. Which is a great way to encourage it. So that is a business-led thing, but I think actually that works really well.
Yep.
Ditch plastic straws. Right, we talked about it, and I have argued that paper straws aren't great either. You've got to drink your drink quite quickly.
Have you heard about the company who wanted to save plastic straws, so they've made these edible ones made out of seaweed? They're called lolly straw.
But wouldn't that make sense anyway? Why aren't all straws not paper, they're seaweed?
I think they're more expensive, but they can be flavoured.
Very good.
So you can it's great.
So I remember growing up, there used to be. Did you ever have milkshakes when you were young?
Yes.
And they used to be. Sorry, this is a complete aside, but they used to be Nesquik.
Yes.
And it was the straw had the Nesquik powder in it.
Yes.
So you put it in.
The straw was plastic.
No, the straw was plastic, but
Yes.
you put in milk at the bottom,
Yeah.
and then when you suck the milk through, it became strawberry milk when it got to your mouth.
I don't remember that part, but I do remember Nesquik and the straw.
But that's genius. That is genius. I know plastic is bad, and I know we're talking about how bad plastic is, and straws particularly, but that was very clever. Nesquik innovated. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Right, so carrying a reusable bag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we give them out with work, actually, quite a lot.
Yes.
And it means that people aren't having to carry a plastic bag around. They can be used a lot longer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because plastic bags tend to be very weak. Although you can buy the posher ones now in supermarkets.
Yes.
But if you have a sort of, it's not Hessian, is it? It's just like a cotton bag.
Yeah, which is when we do the trade shows quite a bit, we give a few of them out. So
mm-hmm.
hopefully people are using them up and down the country. You talked about shampoo, so the stuff about the microbeads, right, being in cleaning products. So although I haven't seen, I've read the brief. Shampoo bars. I've never seen a shampoo bar, but that sounds quite nifty. So presumably,
it sounds like the kind of thing you take to a festival.
They sell them in Lush, among other places.
Okay.
Essentially it looks like soap, but you use it, and it's wrapped in paper,
mm-hmm.
and it's packaging free apart from the paper.
Okay.
And it's another alternative. You can also get kind of deodorant bars like that.
Yeah, and I think so we have a dishwasher at home, and they used to come back in about 5-10 years ago. They were quite popular, the little tablets that were in an individual bag, and now we've gone back to it's a big bottle full of dishwasher liquid, and you just squidge a bit in.
You should even better get the ones in the cardboard box.
Which is the next point,
box.
yeah. So for cleaning products, if you can get them in the
but also moving to sort of bulk storage rather than individually packed items. And then going to supermarkets and that sort of thing. Obviously, you can take your own bags, but if you're going to go and buy vegetables and stuff, same, you can get them in paper bags as opposed to plastic bags.
A lot of supermarkets as well will be happy if you take Tupperware and go to the deli counter. A lot of places are encouraging this. There was adverts for it, I think, for Morrison's.
Do they give you a discount for doing it?
I think that they do. I think it differs between different supermarkets and how into it they are. But if they're not into it now, then in a couple of years' time they'll all be doing it.
But how good would that be for the PR for these supermarkets? Oh, yeah. Imagine if you went in and you got £1 off your lunch because it's in a...
Or the honey roast ham, which is one of my favourite deli items, actually. I'd be tempted to buy more of it. Actually.
Would you?
Yeah. Instead of 6 slices, I might have 8 or 9.
Yeah. And then sort of making... So instead of buying fruit juices and that sort of thing, you make them?
Yeah, and then so there's a point here as well. So I think the problem is, so we culturally, so the kind of weekly shop was the weekly shop where you do we plan ahead and literally you sort of buy everything. I know it's slightly not related because you're still buying the stuff in the packaging, but I think that's potentially one of the reasons. So now that we're just buying stuff that we can use on the day, so we're not buying anything you can store in cupboards or freezers, etc. So, by definition, if you're buying stuff for that single day, you're using a lot more packaging.
Yeah, true.
So, making stuff, as you said.
I think one thing that actually I'll talk about that in a minute. Sorry, I've just gone. Talk about another one.
So, and then so if you do a lot more. So we talked about containers, so for vegetables and stuff. So markets, things like that. So you can. And then the other kind of is apparently nappies for babies. So it says reusable nappies. Actually, my mum was telling me about pre-Pampers days. It's a very controversial subject.
A friend of mine has just had twins, right? And when you have, and I didn't know this, but when you have a newborn baby, apparently you have to change their nappy 12 to 15 times a day.
Wow.
Right? So they just had twins. So that would be 30 nappies a day. And so, if they go with these reusable nappies, obviously that is a hell of a lot of washing. Don't get me wrong. But that is saving I think they bought 500 nappies initially.
Yeah.
And thinking that 500 nappies will last for 6 months. I don't know much about having babies, but no, turns out it doesn't. It doesn't last any time at all.
Do either of you have children?
No, not yet.
It's not obvious at all.
But the other thing that is really important when you're recycling is to make sure that the products aren't contaminated when you send them for recycling. So if you have baked beans in a tin, obviously, it makes sense that you'd wash out the tin. Yep. If you have chicken, in a pot, you need to clean that before it goes into your recycling, because a lot of recycling plants won't touch contaminated sort of recycling, as it were, or recycling products. So make sure you clean your products out before you put them in your recycling. So that's kind of our top tips. I hope we got to 10. I'm not sure if we did.
I think we discussed them,
Yeah. So what we're going to do now then, as a final thing, is discuss a couple of the larger thing, and you're going to talk about this more, I think. Talk about some of the larger projects ongoing.
Yes. So the two projects are really kind of stuck out, and one of them is the way I kind of see it is so you've got all these plastic garbage patches. What do they call it? The Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Yeah, garbage is a horrible American word.
Or rubbish patch. So this is an area within the Pacific Ocean where a lot of, due to kind of currents and wind movements, etc., is where the rubbish just floats. So
yes, because of the tides, and it's between Hawaii and California, and it's massive.
So the Ocean Cleanup Project, something that was started by essentially an engineering dropout from Holland. And so he had this nifty idea of designing this flotilla.
Can we name check him? Do we know his name?
I'm trying to find his name. He's got a very, very exotic name.
Does he?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's find it and then you can try and pronounce it, Harry. That'd be super.
So,
sorry, tell us more.
So, basically, so he had this idea, in his kind of late teens, early 20s, to make this sort of flotilla that's about 600 meters wide in from one side to the other. and it floats on the surface of the water. It harnesses things like the natural elements on the oceans, which is the tide and the wind, essentially, and the waves, and basically it just has these kind of massive arms that are outstretched, and it just moves towards areas of this rubbish, and then it just pushes it, collects it, and then you then get trawlers that come through, and then just all the stuff that's been collected, in theory, gets loaded onto the trawlers, and then they go back onto.
But the key is the flotilla thing is moving slower than the rubbish.
Faster. Because if it's faster,
it's got anchors.
It's
anchors, then everything gets brushed into it.
Yes, so it's got a skirt at the bottom of it. So basically collects stuff that floats on the surface and stuff that's kind of subsurface. But the theory is it goes a little bit. So if that's my rubbish bit, and that's then the sort of tide is taking it away. My flotilla is kind of moving in faster.
I thought it would be the other way around. I thought it would move slower and then the rubbish would come into it.
It's following it basically because it's using it's not kind of mechanical. It's trying to utilize the same forces. Yeah, so it would all go in the same direction.
Anyway,
but anyway, so as an nifty idea, yes, it's they had a full pilot project before Christmas in 2018. It was to some degree successful. So they've had challenges. They've also had questions from kind of the wider marine scientific community about, whether, because they were saying Boyan Slat is the guy's name, Boyan Slat.
Has that just come to you? You've been told that?
Well, Harry, sorry. Thank you, Harry. Thanks for that. So, no, they've had, so the marine biologist community have said, well, if it's kind of floating there and collecting the rubbish, surely it will also collect the various kind of aquamarine life that floats on the surface, and it will potentially hamper all of that. So they've got certainly challenges to kind of come back to the scientific community and prove that it's a sustainable project with obviously minimizing the impact onto the existing ecosystems. But it's apparently what they found was it wasn't floating fast enough. So they sort of miscalculated its kind of floating speed. So they need to obviously speed it up so it can catch the rubbish more effectively. So, we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But that then proves a kind of this grand vision of here's someone who's kind of gone out there and has thought about the bigger picture. And wants to really collect the stuff that's out there and obviously clean up the oceans.
It's great. Listen, these people, they should be.
And he reckons, so they reckon they can take more than 50% of these garbage patches within 5 years if they fully
which would be amazing.
Ramp up the.
Well, the one you were talking about, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch,
yes,
rubbish patch for our English listeners, it's 87,000 tons of plastic in it. That is a serious amount, isn't it? So if he can get rid of 50% of that in 5 years...
But it's not the only one. The key point is, so in all the other great oceans of the world, there are other
there's other
garbage patches. So they're using the Pacific one definitely.
Can we call it rubbish patch?
A rubbish patch? Yeah. Garbage patch. So, but that's definitely, so the rubbish is there, and, I'm going out there to try and find a way to clean it up. So that's one way. Then the other side of it is trying to tackle the deposits of rubbish at source. So as we talked about, so rivers in the developing world, rubbish gets dumped, the plastics get dumped in the rivers flow out to sea, and the rubbish basically collects on the river kind of estuaries. Yeah. Is that where they sort of meet the sea? And then you've got companies like 4Ocean. So they've got these cool bracelets, Harry. So so you can basically buy a bracelet, and they promise if you buy a bracelet, they will collect £1 of rubbish.
Okay, nice.
So that's a good one. But essentially, they're going the other way. They're trying to tackle the rubbish collection at the source.
And then you've got others that are trying to educate, right? So Sky TV have just done their, what's it called, the Ocean Rescue campaign, which is trying to encourage people to use less plastic. And trying to just be aware of where plastic's going. So they've done various TV shows about it, but they're doing a large charge on it. So there's companies out there trying to do bits and pieces.
So it's education, So it's making us aware of. I mean, even it's stuff like what you flush down the toilets. Don't flush plastics down your toilets and stuff. So it's. So education, it's trying to kind of tackle the bigger picture, i.e. tackling these garbage patches, and then also educating people in the developing world and tackling the big hotspots in some of these developing countries.
But for you and I, the take homes are use less plastic, right? So where we can use alternative methods to do bits and pieces, do that, and also recycling. The numbers aren't great in terms of how much we recycle. Try and make it as easy as possible for the products you use to be recycled. So sorting them as per whatever your council says. Hopefully they'll all fall in line and they'll all offer the same thing.
Yes.
But getting it ready to be recycled.
Yes.
And then hopefully the government takes a lead on it. Because they.
But I think they've got to do it through regulation. So learn from things that have been successful. So like the plastic bag levy, put on a tax potentially onto the plastics themselves.
Yeah, using recycled plastics.
And then using recycled and also banning the imports of it. So actually, if you produce the packaging within the country that you're using it, that's another idea.
Yeah. Then
that would stop people having to, or companies rather, importing it. Just to kind of package the food locally. So that's another way. And then obviously, we went and talked about 10 different ways we can minimize things. So
yeah, cool. Well, I think that's it for this week. I think we've kind of gone over on our time limit.
I think we've gone over the time limit. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go over some of the burning questions that we have this week.
So we'll move probably back to more energy saving next week. But I think this is kind of an important one to talk about. So I'm glad we've done it.
Yep.
And anything else from you?
No, I was going to say, so Harry can probably link to all of the campaigns that we've discussed in the comments as well. So yeah, you can go and check out all the other resources. Let's talk about ourselves. Where can you hear more about our podcasts? So
I now remember the name of the one I always forget. So you can listen to our podcast on iTunes podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Podbean, on TuneIn Radio. It's everywhere basically, or on our website, which is www.thegreenage.co.uk. And you can watch us there as well if you want to see what we look like when we're talking. And I think that's it
for this week. See you next week.
See you next week.